Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome friends to this second lecture of week 2 of NPTEL online certification course of soil fertility and fertilizers, and in this week we are talking about soil nitrogen for plant nutrition. So, in the first lecture of this week we have already discussed about different forms of nitrogen, and also we have discussed the mineralization process, immobilization process, and we have discussed the biological nitrogen fixation, and the types of biological nitrogen fixation we have discussed. And also we have seen the overview of nitrogen soil nitrogen cycle, and also we have discussed the importance of CN ratio in controlling the immobilization and mineralization in the soil. So, in this second lecture of week 2 or lecture number 7, we are going to cover these following concepts. So, we are going to discuss in details about the mineralization processes of organic nitrogen, and then we are going to discuss nitrification mechanism in soil, and then we are going to discuss the environmental factors affecting mineralization and nitrification, then soil nitrogen cycle, forms of nitrogen loss, management of fertilizer nitrogen and high nitrogen fertilizer use efficiency. So, all these different types of issues we are going to discuss in this lecture, and these are some of the keywords which we are going to discuss: nitrogen mineralization, aminization, ammonification and nitrification. So, these are some important processes we are going to discuss in details. So, if we see the important nitrogen processes, soil related processes, as well as the types of microorganisms involved, and is there their characteristics, we can have a a detailed overview of these from this table. So, you can see here the first process is aminization process. What is aminization process? I will tell in detail. So, in this aminization process, the microbes are mainly heterotrophic microorganisms are involved, and in this aminization process it requires organic carbon compounds for their source of energy. So, those microbes require organic carbon compounds for their source of energy. Second process is ammonification process. Here also heterotrophic microorganisms are involved, and in the nitrification process this is being governed by autotrophic microorganisms, and these autotrophic microorganisms obtain their energy from oxidation of inorganic salts and their carbon from carbon dioxide of the surrounding atmosphere. So, these are some of the processes, and these are these are the microbes or microorganisms which are involved in these processes. Now, let us start with the aminization process. Now, aminization process is basically conversion of protein to these compounds with amine groups. So, the population of heterotrophic soil microorganisms is basically composed of numerous groups of bacteria and fungi, and each of these organisms is responsible for one or more steps of the numerous reactions in the organic matter decomposition process, and end product of activities of one group acts as a substrate or the next, as so on down the line until the material is decomposed. So, basically what happens, different groups of bacteria and fungi are involved in this decomposition process. So, one groups decompose and their end one groups governs one process, and the end product from that reaction acts as a substrate for the next group, and then they start from there and then convert this substrate to other compounds, and ultimately we reach to the final decomposition process. So, this aminization, so one of the final stages in this decomposition of nitrogenous material is the hydrolytic decomposition of proteins. So, we can see this aminization process release amino acids and amines. So, this process is termed aminization, and it is a function of some of the heterotrophic organisms. So, it can be represented by this equation. So, protein RNH2 plus CO2 plus energy and other products. Okay. So, ultimately from this protein you can see there is a decomposition of protein ultimately to produce these amines, carbon dioxide, energy and other products. So, this is, you can consider this is the first step of decomposition process. Now, the second step is the ammonification process. So, these amines or amino acids so released are further utilized by other groups of heterotrophs with the release of ammoniacal compounds. So, this step is termed ammonification. So, you can see here RNH2 and here it is reacting with the water, ultimately it is producing this ammonia and then alcohol and energy. So, both oxidative and reductive deamination process contribute to ammonification in flooded soils. So, basically in short, the conversion of amino acids to ammoniacal compounds is basically known as the ammonification process, and this ammonification process is mediated by heterotrophs. Okay. Now, we know that ammonification is the second step of mineralization in which the amino groups are converted into ammonium. So, we can see here first we starts with organic nitrogen, and it get converted into ammonium through the ammonification process. So, this is the second step. The first step is aminization and then ammonification, and this ammonium ion is basically utilized by other microorganisms to get mineralized. So, ultimately this ammonium ion gets converted into nitrate, which we are going to discuss, and also some amount of this ammonium ion gets also assimilated by microbial community through the process of immobilization. So, this ammonium which is formed due to mineralization or ammonification can also goes for further mineralization and goes to nitrate, or it can be assimilated by different microorganisms or crops. So, I hope now this ammonification process is clear. Now, biological oxidation of ammonium to nitrate in the soil is known as nitrification. This is one of the major step of nitrogen dynamics in soil. So, this two-step process of nitrification is basically accomplished by conversion of ammonium ion to nitrate first, and then from nitrate to nitrite first, and from nitrite to nitrate by two groups of autotrophic bacteria in the soil. So, here you can see the first step is conversion of ammonium ion to nitrite, and the second step this nitrite gets converted to nitrate. So, the first conversion of ammonium to nitrate is basically mediated by nitrosomonas, which is obligate autotrophic microorganism. The second step, that is conversion of nitrite to nitrate, is governed by another obligate autotrophic bacteria called nitrobacter. So, these two organisms play an important role for conversion of ammonium ion to ultimately to nitrate, and this process of conversion of ammonium to nitrate is known as nitrification process. So, nitrification is very important process through which this ammonium gets converted into nitrate, because most of the crops prefer this nitrate as an available nitrogen form. So, it is important that this ammonium which is formed due to ammonification process must be converted into this nitrate through this nitrification process. Okay. So, this biological nitrogen it is a biological oxidation process, and these two, and one more important thing is this nitrite, which is an intermediate step or intermediate product in this whole nitrification process. This is very short lived and it is toxic in nature for plant also, but fortunately it is very short lived and gets converted to nitrate very fast. So, that is why there is no accumulation of nitrite in the soil. It gets converted into nitrate very fast through the nitrobacter organisms or bacteria. Now, it is clear to us that nitrification is a microbe mediated process and nitrosomonas basically helps in conversion of ammonium to nitrite, and nitrobacter helps in conversion of nitrate to nitrate. Now, we will also see in our coming slides that the rapid nitrogen conversion to nitrate is sometimes not desirable, because plant can uptake very few amount, very small amount of available nitrate, and the rest of it gets lost from the soil through different process. So, to arrest or to stop this rapid conversion of ammonium to nitrite, so that nitrate production gets nitrate production is reduced. So, we generally apply different types of nitrification inhibitors. What are these nitrification inhibitors? One of them is nitropyrin, which is also known as NSARF. Another one is dicyandiamide or DCD, and these basically interfere with the function of these nitrosomonas bacteria. So, the conversion of ammonium to the nitrite gets hampered, and as a result nitrate production will not be there. So, this is called nitrification inhibitors. So, here you can see the complete conversion, complete process of nitrification. So, you can see here the organic nitrogen to, and then ultimately ammonium to nitrosomonas to nitrite mediated by nitrobacter to nitrate. So, this ammonium plus 3 molecules of oxygen ultimately converts into nitrite, and then 4 protons, and ultimately it gets oxidized to nitrate. So, this is the nitrification process, and you can see that this nitrite is an intermediate and very short lived, which gets immediately converted to nitrate. Now, nitrification, we know that it is a transformation of ammonium to nitrate and then nitrite to nitrate. It can be, this is a pathway of nitrification, you can clearly see here. So, first there is an ammonium ion which is, and then this is basically utilized by ammonia oxidizing microbes or nitrosomonas to gets converted into nitrite, and then this nitrate gets converted into nitrate oxidizing microbes or nitrobacter to nitrate, and from both these they can convert into nitric oxide gas and nitrous oxide gas, and ultimately goes to the atmosphere also. So, this is showing the pathway of nitrification. And also we can see here that there are different types of enzymes which which governs this conversion of the different conversions in this nitrification process. We can see this ammonium to ammonium hydroxide conversion is basically governed by this ammonia monooxygenase enzyme, and then these from this ammonium hydroxide to nitrite is being governed by this hydroxylamine oxidoreductase enzyme, and this conversion of nitrite to nitrate is mediated by this nitrite oxidoreductase enzyme. So, not only it is this process is governed by microorganisms, but at the same time these are also dependent on these different enzymes also. So, these are some of the factors which are affecting the nitrification in soil. First of all is supply of ammonium ion, then population of nitrifying organism, then soil reaction, soil aeration, and then soil moisture, temperature. These are all important for controlling this nitrification process in the soil. Now, in neutral to alkaline pH condition, chances of formation of nitrite is more than in acid soil. So, in alkaline condition, formation of nitrite, its chance is more than in acid soil. And when we go for high rate of application of urea fertilizer, that can result in the accumulation of nitrite even under acidic pH condition, because pH increase is due to hydrolysis of urea. So, when you apply this urea into acidic pH soil, that can increase the pH by the hydrolysis of urea, and ultimately that results in the accumulation of nitrate. Now, mineralization and nitrifications are also influenced by several factors like moisture, aeration, pH. So, for example, nitrification occurs very slowly at cold temperatures and ceases once the temperature declines below freezing, because the microorganisms, the bacteria which are involved in this nitrification process, their activity is increased with the increase of temperature. So, if the temperature goes below freezing, they become inactive, and ultimately there is no conversion of one nitrogen form to another nitrogen form. The rate increases with increasing temperature until the bacterial viability is reduced, which is around 95 degree Fahrenheit to 100 degree Fahrenheit, and then nitrification begins to decline as the temperature increases. So, there is also a certain threshold beyond which the nitrification also will go down. Moisture and oxygen are also necessary for microbial function in both the mineralization as well as nitrification process. Remember that since these processes are mediated by microbes, we have to ensure that their growth and their growth condition, proper growth conditions are maintained. Excessive moisture sometimes limits oxygen availability, reducing this mineralization and nitrification rates, because nitrification is an oxidation process. So, when there is excessive moisture in the soil, that will occupy the space of air, ultimately reducing the oxygen availability and ultimately reducing this nitrification process. So, in this condition, this is called the anaerobic soil condition, this nitrification process will go down, and rates of mineralization and nitrification proceed most rapidly at pH level near 7 and decline as the soil becomes excessively acid or alkaline, because the microbes become inactive when the soil becomes excessively acidic or alkaline in nature. Also, since nitrification is a microbial mediated process, the rate is governed by factors that affect these biological activities, such as ammonia in soil water, which inhibits the nitrification process, also temperature, which we have already discussed, soil erosion in aerobic soil, and soil pH generally ranges from 4.5 to 10, but we have discussed that optimum pH is from 7.5 to 8.5, and of course, the soil moisture. So, this nitrification is highest when the soil moisture is conducive for the growth of the microbes, but among all these, the highest influence or the largest influence can be seen from the temperature. So, the optimum temperature for nitrification is around 90 degree Fahrenheit. Below 50 degree Fahrenheit, the rate slow rapidly and nitrification continues until 32 degree Fahrenheit. So, soil temperature cannot be controlled, but because soil cool in the winter, then nitrification of winter season application will be reduced. So, basically the nitrification process slows down in the winter because soil becomes soil becomes colder in winter. So, that is an implication of temperature in the nitrification process. And also nitrification is governed by soil oxygen level, because it is an oxidation process, and also the ammonium concentration. So, ammonium is required for nitrification because it is the starting point, right, and oxygen is required in low concentration for the conversion of ammonium to nitrite. However, for the conversion of nitrite to nitrate, we require high amount of oxygen concentration. Without oxygen, there will not be no conversion, from nitrite to nitrate. Now, in acidic soil, bacteria and nitrification may be inhibited, and intermediate forms of nitrogen such as nitric oxides are also produced during the nitrification process. Now, when conditions are ideal for nitrification, nitric oxides and nitrous oxides are produced in low concentration. However, when nitrification has started, but the conditions are not ideal to complete the conversion of nitrite to nitrate, the concentration of these two gases increases. So, lack of oxygen and acidic soil can stop this nitrification process also. So, you should always keep in mind these factors while taking a decision regarding the nitrification process, because nitrification is a complex interplay of different environmental factors and microbes, and one should have a clear idea about this nitrification process, so that maximum amount of nitrogen can be available to the plant. Otherwise, there will be loss of nitrogen. So, you can see in this graph, there is a relationship between the soil temperature and relative nitrification. So, as the soil temperature increases, the relative nitrification increases, the percent of relative nitrification increases. So, that shows the importance of temperature in controlling this nitrification. Also, in this graph, you can see the importance of temperature. So, as the temperature increases, the nitrification process increases, the rate of nitrification increases. So, of course, when there is a very low temperature, that reduces the nitrification process. Also, we can see that the influence of tillage on organic nitrogen in soil. So, of course, as we maintain the soil for long duration. So, of course, the nitrogen in soil will go down due to the tillage practices. So, when there is a tillage practices, that influences the decomposition of nitrogen, of organic matter, and that creates the percent that basically reduces the percent content of nitrogen in soil because of different types of decomposition processes. Because when there is a tillage practice, that opens up the soil, that helps in more oxidation of the organic compound, and you know that nitrogen is mainly present in organic form, 95% in organic form, and when there is an oxidation, that will reduce the nitrogen content in the soil. So, here we can see a overview of this these different processes. So, you can see there is a sedimentary organic matter, which ultimately goes to enrich this organic nitrogen. From organic nitrogen, mineralization process will convert this will results in this ammonium ion. This ammonium ion will go through nitrification process, ultimately will produce this nitrate, and there are some ammonium containing mineral which will enclose these ammonium ions, and there are some nitrate minerals also. Anyway, this nitrate will be assimilated by the plant, and ultimately will convert again to organic nitrogen from this inorganic nitrate, and due to the denitrification process, this denitrification process generally occurs in the oxygen limiting condition, that is anaerobic condition. So, in this anaerobic condition microbes utilize this nitrate and ultimately converts into these nitrogen gases, and ultimately this nitrogen will go to the atmosphere, and some amount of nitrogen will be again fixed to biological nitrogen fixation and ultimately goes to this organic nitrogen pool. So, this will show the conversion of different forms of nitrogen. And this is a snapshot of the soil nitrogen cycle. You can see we have already discussed all these things. So, the nitrogen gas goes through the symbiotic nitrogen fixation, ultimately goes to organic matter, and and this organic matter will be mineralized to form this ammonium ion. These ammonium ion will go through this nitrification process, ultimately will produce this nitrite and nitrate. This nitrate will be uptaken by the plant, and when the plant dies it goes to the organic matter pool also. Okay. So, and also the conversion of this ammonium to organic forms is example of immobilization, and immobilization also occurs from conversion of nitrate to these organic matter forms. And while this nitrite getting converted into nitrate, denitrification process can release the nitrogen in the atmosphere, and also these nitrates is also very soluble in water and thereby lost from the soil through the leaching process. And ammonium ion, depending on the soil pH, gets also released into the atmosphere through ammonia gas, and this is known as ammonia volatilization process. And this ammonium ion is also being contributed by different types of industrial fixation. So, this is showing the snapshot of soil nitrogen cycle. So, let us see what are the major forms of nitrogen losses in different mechanisms. So, we can see in case of denitrification process, nitrogen mainly lost in the form of nitrous oxide and dinitrogen gas. In case of volatilization, it is lost as ammonia gas. In case of leaching, it is lost as nitrate, because nitrate is highly soluble in water, and in fixation is another process through which the nitrogen gets lost. So, ammonium is lost through fixation process to different minerals which are present in the soil. So, guys, these are the references of this lecture, and I hope that you have gained some insight to this soil nitrogen cycle and these related processes. We have discussed the important factors which governs this nitrification, and let us start from here, and we will discuss more about this soil nitrogen dynamics in our upcoming lectures. Thank you.